On today's show, the Ottawa Senators were overwhelmed in Tampa Bay, falling 5-1. We'll look at what adjustments and lessons can be learned from those two losses this week.
And things don't get any easier for them, Ross, as we're going to preview their next game up against the Florida Panthers.
This is Brady Tkachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome! You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Today is Friday, February 7th, and Pilsy, save me the injuries, save me the fact that the score wasn't indicative of how the game was played. The Ottawa Senators went down to Tampa with a mission of getting at least one win, and they failed to even get 1 point.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when we had these games circled leading up to them, especially, Ross, heading to Tampa on a 5-game win streak, I think we had higher expectations than losing both of these games, and last night's game was just kind of a humble reminder of where the Sens are and where the Tampa Bay Lightning are as far as their rosters are at the time. And it's tough. Every Sens fan is disappointed, but you tweeted it, Ross. Like, we used to pray to be in a playoff spot. And sure, we're not in that pretty Atlantic Division third spot anymore, but the Ottawa Senators are still in a playoff spot.
We all handle losses differently. You know what I did last night as handling that loss?
I'm going to guess it involved mini eggs and chocolate bar wrappers in your hoodie pouch.
Now, I do have a couple chocolate wrappers sitting around, but no, I deleted the divisional standings from my bookmarks. We're done with the divisional standings until further notice. Yes. I know the Sens are still tied for third in the Atlantic Division.
Yeah, come on, man.
Tampa has 2 games in hand, but it soothes the soul to just look at the wild card race. If you can somehow get into third, you know what? Seeding to me doesn't really matter. I'm just happy to be here in the playoff picture. But when you look at the wild card race, I feel like, especially with Tampa being the team, when Boston was there, that was where it was a little bit of a mirage. But with Tampa there, that was a team that you could tell has played in hundreds of meaningful games. Yeah. They knew what that game meant, and they were able to execute.
Both games.
That was the difference in the game. I don't blame the Senators' effort level, per se. No. There's areas of the game that we'll talk about that they could clean up, but the execution was awful. And I saw people, myself included, that noticed the ice was garbage, both games, but both teams are playing on it. So I don't have that as an excuse, but the puck was bouncing on every Senator stick. I don't think they completed 2 passes in a row in the first 2 periods last night. It was just a team that is trying to find a way to be a competitor against a team that competes night in, night out, has 2 Stanley Cups, and has done it, been there, and accomplished these things in the past. Like, it was men against boys out there. It really was. And I know it was 2-1 with 5 minutes left. It was tied going into the third period on Tuesday. But, like, did it feel like the Senators ever had a chance to win that game? Either of them?
No. But it certainly didn't feel like, until the third period of last night's game, it didn't feel like they were getting blown away. Like, I kind of thought, Ross, okay, the Sens are hanging with the Lightning, and maybe we can bring this past regulation and get a point and hopefully battle with them in overtime or in the shootout. But the thing is, too, Ross, you start looking at these teams' rosters and you say, okay, the Sens are missing Pinto and Norris. Well, the Lightning were missing Nick Paul the first game and then Cirelli the second game. But then you start looking at who's there. Nikita Kucherov, there's no one on the Ottawa Senators that is even in his realm. So he's there. So that's huge. And then you've got Vasilevsky. If Linus Ullmark isn't playing, that's a massive mismatch, Vasilevsky and Forsberg. And then Victor Hedman. Sure, some of the young defensemen on the Ottawa Senators are very capable and are top pair defensemen. but nobody is in his echelon as far as guys that get meaningful games done and have played in them. So even though there was some comparables on the injuries, for me, it's looking at this team and who was there for Tampa, and they still had the star power easily over the Ottawa Senators, and they probably always will, at least for quite a bit more years.
Yeah, and look, it's not even just the top guys. That decor is massive. Like even that Lilleberg guy, Chernak obviously is more of a well-known name, but Perbix, Radish, these no-name guys that they've been able to put into the lineup are big and don't allow you to get into the middle of the ice at all, which is another point against the whole Eric Brandstrom discussion, where Ottawa's trying to go that way with big defensemen. The only thing is one of their big defensemen fumbles the puck every time he has it, number 23. But other than that, like 11-7 is a joke, by the way. 11-7 does not work. You can double shift your top center on the fourth line anytime you want. You don't need to have 7 defensemen out there, and you're literally just wasting a spot. And I get it.
I don't think they wanted to go 11-7, Ross.
It wasn't, but this is where we're going to get into the next conversation on the depth of this team and how they can rejig it to be able to have more depth, because they have too many AHL guys in the lineup. If you have 11 forwards, you can't have 3 AHLers in there, like pure AHLers. No disrespect to Matthew Highmore, to Cole Reinhardt, and to a lesser extent, Zach Ostapchuk, who I've been banging on the table now for a long time, needs to be playing top 6 in the AHL. He's at 30 games, 35 games now in the NHL this year. More. 41.
Yeah, more, Ross.
41 out of 55 games this year. And what's he sitting at? 1 goal in 41 games. Look.
No apples?
3. He almost had a goal last night. If that happened at the start of the period, that's a goal. There was just too much snow buildup, and the ice is horrific in the humidity down in Tampa. But that little squeaker goes right to the line.
Well, that was Clevin, not Ostapchuk.
Oh, was it? Okay, Ostapchuk was the one who was pointing upstairs. He wanted them to go take a look at it. So he was on the ice for that. But, if you have 11 forwards, you need more NHL bodies in there. So that's a conversation for afterwards. But one thing the injuries didn't affect, and sorry, just to finish that point, Nicholas Matin-Palo played 5 minutes and 35 seconds in that game. Travis Hamonic played 9 minutes and 52 seconds. You had 2 defensemen play under 10 minutes in this game. It was unfortunate because, again, cap situation, the team can't really do anything. They're not going to play a man short, so you're going to dress that extra defenseman, but it really cost them. Tim Stützle played 22 minutes and 49 seconds in this game, Pilsy. Guess how many shots on goal he had?
Oh, I mean, he doesn't shoot the puck. I'll say 1.
0.
Yeah.
0 shots on goal. He did get an assist on a shot that was going 5 meters wide, and Amadio got a great tip.
Well, that was a set play, because if you watch the replay, Ross, Timmy curls around and Amadio points his stick over here, like, Timmy, send it over here. And Timmy reads that. So that's actually a good play. But I mean, it just goes to show Timmy's only approach of shooting on net was a shot purposely going wide that was more meant as a pass. Classic
Amazing.
Timmy.
Amazing. Like, you know what the real problem is? In these 2 games, Michael Amadio was their best player.
He scored in both of them.
Yeah. That's great for Michael Amadio, not great for the Ottawa Senators.
Agreed. Yeah.
No points for Brady Tkachuk in the 2 games. Tim Stützle had a couple assists. The assist he had in the first game was after the empty netter, right? He got an assist on the Batherson goal. So,
yeah.
And
that's one thing, too, I kind of want to get into while we're talking about this game. Everybody's dunking on Forsberg, and now we're back to hating Forsberg, even though he had been playing good up to this game. And say what you want. Maybe a lot of Sens fans disagree with me, but I was going through those goals last night. I didn't think this game was on Forsberg. You only scored 1 goal, and it was Michael Amadio in the first period.
And the breakdown on the breakaway. You can't have a guy passing below his hash marks, and all of a sudden it's a breakaway the other way.
Yeah, that's not Anton Forsberg's fault.
No, of course not.
And then people are, and you want to get on him being like, man, they always score 5-hole in the breakaway.
They do.
Which is true, but it's Brandon Hagel on a breakaway. This guy puts those away. It's not like...
Does Levi Marilainen stop it, though? Probably.
Yeah, but Levi Marilainen, that's his expertise is the mano a mano breakaway style. But you look later, Eastamont gets a breakaway on Tyler Clevin, a fumbled puck, and Forsberg makes the save there. So I don't know. I'm not fully on the hating on Forsberg because of that game. If you score more than one goal and you get better opportunities and you're closer in this game rather than just 2-1 and you're able to make a push in the third, then we can talk about that. But for me, this loss is not on Anton Forsberg.
No, it's not. I'm still perplexed by the decision to not play Linus Ullmark, and I'm going to be watching very carefully for Four Nations.
There's only one reasonable explanation, Ross. It's that they didn't like the way Linus Ullmark looked and felt after that game. There's no other explanation for me.
Then he can't play in the Four Nations. If I watch him play at the Four Nations and he's stretching his back out after every goddamn whistle, I'm gonna go crazy.
And that's fair. Yeah, that's a fair point, Ross. And we're gonna have to wait and see how that goes. And this Four Nations tournament is, I don't know. I want to get hyped for it, but it just seems like it's creating much more headaches for NHL fans, NHL teams, coaches, players, management than it is creating. Yeah, I mentioned fans. Than it is creating hype, or that it's like a legitimate tournament. Like it seems a little gimmicky to me.
No,
now.
And we're not in the minority here. Just ask Vancouver Canucks fans about their captain Quinn Hughes. They're in a playoff race. They don't want Quinn Hughes going to this tournament. He's banged up. He missed the last couple of games, so we'll see. Like Columbus with Zach Werenski, same thing. He's been their MVP this year. They're battling for a playoff spot. Like it's going to be fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. I'll get sucked into seeing McDavid, McKinnon, and Crosby all on the same team.
Yeah.
But for a standpoint of a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 7 years, and now all of a sudden we're watching the two best players on the team. Brady Tkachuk went hard into the boards last night, shook it off. But like, if that's something where, hey, 2 weeks of rest could do you well, he has too much pride. He's not going to pull himself from that. So it's going to be very fascinating to see. The good news for Ottawa Senators and their fans is that 16 of the final 26 games after Saturday are on home ice, where the Senators have one of the best home records in the National Hockey League, sitting at 16-7-2, and even better in their last 10 home games. Since the Buffalo game, they've been undefeated in regulation at home. They've been unbelievable on home ice, so they'll have a lot more time to play at the CTC later. But this game on Thursday came down to two things: execution for Tampa. You could tell they're just crisp. And the power play for Ottawa. Jack hit on it really well. We posted the short last night of, like, they took Norris off that top power play unit. Giroux's been up there for a couple weeks, and they did nothing.
Yeah.
Early power play, 2 minutes into the game. Funny enough, I went back and looked, and in the game Ottawa beat Tampa early this year, they got an early power play. They scored 1 minute and 50 seconds into the game on a power play there. They had a chance to do it similarly and get on the board first and get some momentum. A too many men on the ice call. That's gifted to you right there. And they couldn't get it done. And that's unfortunate because there were a number of power play opportunities that could have tied this game, and they didn't even generate momentum. They didn't even get a shot on goal in their third period power play. They gave up a 2-on-1 in a couple of them. Like, it's just, they need to clean that up so badly. And talking about the power play, we looked up the stats, and in the first 28 games of the year, going up to and including the Anaheim game, where they went 3 for 5, the Senators were 4th in the National Hockey League in power play percentage. And since then, in 27 games, so it's like a perfect split for 55 games, they're 24th in the league. Now, ironically, their record is much better in that half where they're 24th on the power play. Could you imagine what their record would be if they kept their top 10 power play going?
Insane. Yeah.
They'd probably be second in the division.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not how it went. So my final thoughts on the two games in Tampa is you're not on their level. You're not. You took on the champ, per se, and you missed. So now you got to knock down a few pegs. Now you're back with the Detroits, the Columbuses, the Bostons. You're now in that round. And it's funny to say this because they are still tied for third in the division, but that's how close things are. They had a chance. Every time the Senators have a chance to really push themselves up the standings, it feels like that's when they fall back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that an issue for you? Or is that something that they're learning and battling through? And as long as they stay middle of the pack, you're going to keep getting those opportunities to try to push forward.
I mean, it's certainly not ideal, but yeah, Ross, like that, like it's like act like you've been there before. The Sens haven't been here before. Like they were viewing these games as like playoff games. Zach Stapchuk said it, and they don't know how to play in playoff games. And we saw that, and the inexperience showed here. So for me, Ross, I don't have that entitlement of being like the Sens had the chance to pull away and they blew it. The whole season's over. What are we going to do? Because this was kind of expected from an inexperienced group with injuries going up against an experienced group that was playing at home for Tampa. And this is going to be an up and down roller coaster ride right to the finish. So Sens fans, if this was the final blow for you and you think blow it up and this team has no chance of making playoffs, well,
do it at your own peril.
Unbuckle from the roller coaster, get off the ride, go get lunch, and wait for next
grab
season.
Some popcorn, maybe a turkey leg. Just
get a turkey leg and start walking around because you're done with how
go to the
season's
zoo.
gonna go.
Like do all the things where you can control your own environment, because this is going to be not for the faint of heart. We have 27 games left in this Ottawa Senators regular season, and they've put themselves in a position that preseason we would have loved. But would we like some more depth on this team? That's a conversation we'll have next, and we'll wrap up today's show with a weekend preview tomorrow. Huge game against a team that not only won the Stanley Cup, but is completely healthy. That's next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. There's only one playoff game left in the NFL, and it's a Super Bowl, Super Bowl 59. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. Not just sport events, you can check out music, comedy, and theater as well. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you're not wasting time searching through thousands of tickets you don't even want. I recently used Game Time to go to the first game in Tampa, and they make it easy on the app. You can view what your seat's going to look like before you purchase, and I hate surprise fees at checkout, so I turned on the all-in pricing feature, and it tells me what the price is going to be right from the get-go. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the Glebe Central Pub. Are you needing last minute tickets to the Sens Shuttle? Well, you can get those on Glebe Central Pub website. They've got Sens Shuttle tickets for the Saturday game after the Four Nations break against the Montreal Canadiens, the Winnipeg game the following Wednesday, and how about March 1st? We will be boots on the ground on the shuttle at the GCP. We're going to hang out there the whole day. So come by, have a pint, have a bite, and get your tickets for the GCP shuttle. The tickets are already moving. Get your tickets early if you're considering coming, because we're looking at getting 2 buses full of Sens fans to that game against the Sharks. Hopefully it's point night at the arena, but what we do know for sure is the vibes are absolutely free at the GCP. The bus leaves the pub an hour and 15 minutes before puck drop. Sue navigates you right to the door in plenty of time, and then picks you right back up 15 minutes after the game and takes you back to the pub. Now, why is that the best part? Well, maybe the Sens game is too, but you get back to the pub and there's live music every Saturday night at the Glebe Central Pub. Oh, it gets better? Sure does. Because you're a listener of Locked On Senators, you're entitled to 10% off your order when you go on a Sens game day and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. So if you rack up a bill, that could pay for the shuttle itself. So head to the GCP where the vibes are free. That's 779 Bank Street, and let them know that Locked On Senator sent you. Can't wait to see you at the GCP on March 1st. Head there anytime, though. Great walking distance from Lansdowne. Awesome time at the GCP. Head there for the Super Bowl this Sunday if you want to be amongst other Ottawa faithful. Go to the GCP at 779 Bank Street. The vibes are free at the GCP. All right, Pilsy. So the Ottawa Senators are heading into the weekend with one more game until the Four Nations tournament. Tonight will be some out of scoreboard watching. We're going to be cheering for the Pittsburgh Penguins to beat the New York Rangers in Madison Square Garden, and the Winnipeg Jets are hosting the New York Islanders. The only way, Pilsy, that the Ottawa Senators will not be in a playoff spot at the Four Nations is if the Islanders win both games this weekend and the Senators lose in regulation tomorrow night. The Islanders are in Winnipeg tonight, and then second half of a back-to-back in Minnesota tomorrow. So we are rooting heavy for the Winnipeg Jets tonight. Those are the only two games of meaning, and we're obviously looking ahead to Saturday's game. But depth has been tested for the Ottawa Senators this year. No Josh Norris, no Shane Pinto. I'm going to say no Linus Ullmark as a part of this too. I know he dressed for last night's game, but he wasn't playing. You need to find a way to get some more depth on this team. But how do you do it with only $100,000 in cap space and barely any assets to make a move?
I don't know. I don't know how you do it, Ross. That is the question here. And I think that's what's difficult is, and I kind of feel for Steve Staios, Michael Andlauer, and the executive staff here, is they were left with a tough position with how this team was handed off to them. And then on top of that, Ross, I hate to bring it up, but they got to forfeit one of their first round picks too. So it's not like you have that you can flex and use to acquire more talent on an NHL roster either. I think I know where you're going to lean when it comes to clearing some cap space to bring in some more depth. But I do agree with you. You're looking at this team, and no offense to Cole Reinhardt, Matthew Highmore. Actually, I got to be honest, Matthew Highmore has been a pleasant surprise. He's got a lot more speed and a lot more kind of grease to his game than I really gave him credit for. And Cole Reinhardt, if he's a guy playing on your fourth line for a handful of games, I got no issue with that. But when you're in the position the Ottawa Senators are in, and you're relying on these guys on a more than short-term basis and in elevated roles than just the fourth line, it really shows how weak this team is depth-wise, how weak the prospect pool is, and how strapped they are to the cap. It was crazy, Ross, when we learned that the reason the Sens couldn't bring up Stephen Halliday is because they can't afford to bring up a guy making less than $1 million who's never played an NHL game. And on this team, it's just crazy that that's how close things are. Thank goodness the cap is going up, but it goes up for all the other teams as well, Ross. So that's one thing to consider too.
Yeah, and a lot of these depth pieces that are on Daily Faceoff's trade bait board, they're all making between $1.5 and $5 million, really. So it's just unreasonable to expect that the Ottawa Senators can get a player like that. Sure, if you move Anton Forsberg somehow and are able to not keep any money there, you can get rid of $2.75 million, and that would free up some flexibility for them. But I just don't know if it's realistic for them to do that. Although, I didn't realize I'd miss Levi Merrilainen this quickly, but I just have more confidence when he's in net than Anton Forsberg. Again, the loss wasn't on Forsberg last night, but I just feel like the confidence level for the team too. They play so well in front of Levi Merrilainen. But I think you have to scour teams, even teams that are, in a playoff spot, for fourth line guys that have at least 100 games or more of NHL experience. And I think Matthew Highmore actually does, although a lot of it was quite a while ago, years ago even.
No, I don't think he has that much.
Yeah, 161.
What?
Yeah, man. He played a couple full seasons under Travis Green and one full season under Travis Green. And he averages about 15 to 20 games a year, but he's been playing since 2017 with Chicago. Okay. So look, I think Morgan Barron type guy, that's a name in Winnipeg where he's kind of been a fourth line guy. And if they're going to add at the deadline, he might be a healthy scratch. They just need someone that can have a proper role. And I think be a little more efficient in his movements, execution, all that. So I would just be looking for depth. And I know I tweeted last night after the game, these games have to be a message to Steve Staios that more work needs to be done. You can't stand pat, add Boris Tkachuk at the deadline and be like, all right, wipe my hands with it. Let's see what happens. Now, these moves, I'm not looking for a big splash. I understand Steve Staios, that's not his MO, but he owes it to this group that's put themselves in the top wild card spot right now in a very close race. He owes it to them to be able to throw out an NHL lineup game in, game out. I don't mind if Cole Reinhart, Zach Ostapchuk, those types of players, I don't mind if they play sporadically, but they can't be everyday NHL guys.
And they can't be elevated from their roles that they're expected to do, right? Like these guys are playing third line minutes, which really they should not be.
Matthew Highmore's most common line mates last night were Ostapchuk and Drake Batherson.
Yeah.
Reinhart played 2 minutes with Tim Stützle last night. No, more. He played 5 minutes with Tim Stützle with other wingers on his other side. Like, they need to add. And, of course, you'd like to add a winger for Tim Stützle. That would be the number one goal, but I just don't think it's realistic. I think David Perron's going to have to be that guy, whether the fit's there or not. So we'll see. But the Sens, they need to make at least a couple depth moves. Somehow be creative. Like, it feels like the contenders every year, they
find ways to get it done.
They find ways to get it done. Steve Staios and the Sens management team has to find a way to get more depth, both up front and on the back end. Although Sabrango and Martin Paolo have been nice surprises that can play games.
Martin Paolo especially. Like, I have no issue with him being an everyday sixth defenseman with Tyler Kleven. No issue.
Agreed. So we'll see what Steve Staios is thinking. Let us know in the comments who you think would be a good player to target. I know Ryan Donato's name's out there. He's a $2 million cap hit, so you'd have to do some juggling to make that work. But I just don't think that you can keep this exact team going forward, especially when you see that Josh Norris and Shane Pinto continue to miss games. Like, maybe it's a center. Maybe it's a third-line center that you have to get. Like, I don't like the cap hit, but like a player like JG Pageau, like a guy with experience who's been in the league for a long time. You're not getting him for $5 million. Even 2.5 is too much if you get 50% retained. But that type of player that can win faceoffs and play in a bottom six role and be a role player on the team. That's my hope for the Ottawa Senators, because it's unrealistic to expect them to get a player that can fit in with speed and a shot on Tim Stützle's line. David Perron's that guy, for better or for worse.
Now, the only real way this team's going to clear cap space is through Anton Forsberg, in my opinion. And $2.75 million, unfortunately, is too much for what Forsberg provides for this team. You can find a goalie that's making league minimum that can provide the same, if not better than Forsberg. Like, I think that's clear. Anton Forsberg, exactly. But this is where I'm glad you mentioned that, Ross. This is where I'll lead to the conversation is, are you at a point now where you're comfortable just not having Forsberg at all and leaning on Linus and Levi Merilainen?
Thumbs up.
Okay. Linus Ullmark gets injured now.
Levi Merilainen.
God forbid. But you need two who's your second goalie? Like, you have
grab someone on waivers. Grab someone on, like, that's
who?
I don't care. But whoever it is,
goalies on waivers. People are putting their goalies on waivers.
Brandon Halverson was on waivers yesterday. I'm just saying, you can get a proper third string. I think Merilainen's done enough to be the second string.
Totally. And I'm 100% with you on that, Ross. But unfortunately, Linus Ullmark is not a goalie that you can look at and be like, we can put him in permanent marker for every single game for the rest of the season or most of the games. Like, that's just not reality. And I wish it was. And there's a lot of Sens fans that are like, you're paying him all this money, you gave him this, and he can't even play this many games. You can be angry about that, but you're just yelling at clouds at that point, because unfortunately that is just not the reality. So let's look at the reality. And are you comfortable knowing that possibly if you let Forsberg go, that you're going to have Levy and you're going to have to find some other goalie, and that's going to be your crutch that you're leaning on the rest of this season? And I'm not saying I'm not comfortable with that. I'm just saying that is where management is at. And I think Sens fans are so frustrated being like, this is such an obvious choice. Just send Fordsy to the moon and have Levy play every game. And hopefully Linus is more healthy. But you're in risky business if you do that. Like, for me, Ross, the Senators need to find a way where they can send Forsberg somewhere, maybe with a third round pick, and get just a league minimum goalie, and then that depth piece as well. Like, that's where I think they have to start looking at finding a creative way to do that. Maybe start looking at rebuilding teams that have extra goalies and that have depth guys on expiring deals that they're just looking to get something for. I think that is kind of the approach that I think makes sense.
So let me take you back to the last time the Sens made the playoffs. Who was the Sens third string goalie? Who was the Sens third string goalie that year?
I have no clue.
Exactly. I rest my case. Mike Condon played 26 straight games. Craig Anderson was hurt, and nobody knows or cares who the third stringer was.
Yeah, and that's fair, Ross, but like that's a risk. Like, it doesn't work out like that all the time, is all I'm
risk,
saying.
no fun. Andrew Hammond and Chris Driedger combined for 4 starts in 5 games during that season. Funny enough, the Hamburglar was 4-0-2. This guy just won games, even when he wasn't playing at his best. But, I mean, you've got a goalie in the minors who's making league minimum, and it would open up things to get depth up front. And that's where I think you need.
Yeah, Ross, don't get it twisted. I'm not disagreeing with you. I like this is not a battle between us here. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm trying to shed light on why maybe management is taking the approach they are, and they're not doing the things that Sens fans think are obvious. Because if this was a case where we didn't have a goalie making league minimum that we trusted, and that has the second best save percentage in the league when you organize it by 10 games or more, because that's what I was looking at, trying to find guys. And then I scrolled up and I was like, oh, Ottawa, oh, Levy's there. Like, they have a guy that can do that. So it's possible. But if your management, are you comfortable taking that risk just to acquire another bottom 6 guy?
I hope so. But what management wants and what we want is a win tomorrow night for the Ottawa Senators. Preview of the matchup in Florida against the Panthers. After this, you're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day. All right, Philzy. So it's a preview of Saturday night's games. 7 o'clock puck drop, hockey night in Canada, Battle of the Tkachuks in South Florida, looking to salvage a 2-2 road trip. Right now, they're 1-2-0 with the win against Nashville and 2 losses that felt like 20 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Are those horns coming out of your hat?
No.
Oh, you're playing devil's advocate pretty well last segment.
Hey. No, this is what I was not disagreeing with you. I'm on your side. I knew you, and you always do this to me, Ross. You take the popular opinion, and then I try to shed light on what the team is doing, and then you say Pillsy hates what Sens fans want. That is not the case. But it's interesting because there's certainly different ways you can look at this, and it's actually crazy, Ross. I kind of forgot we had a game preview to do because I was like, all right, we're going to lean on this conversation some more, and then after break, we're going to get into it even more. But we do have one more game to talk about before the Ottawa Senators go on break here.
And what this win would do for the morale going into 2 weeks off would be indescribable. I think it's that important of a game now.
Yeah, it's huge. Unfortunately, Ross, you couldn't have really handpicked a worse opponent to try to get a momentum boost. The Florida Panthers, defending Stanley Cup champions, at home for them, and a team that has just literally big brothered this team. But
hey, what's the record this year head to head?
Tell me.
1-0 for Ottawa. You were there, buddy.
There we go. Yeah. I don't have a good memory, as you can see here. But
is that the only win you've seen this? No, you got the win in Calgary.
Yep, got the win in Calgary.
Right.
But yeah, that was at home for Ottawa, though, Ross.
Yep.
I think that is an important case as well.
And you know why they won that game? Linus Ullmark was fantastic.
It's true.
Yeah, and we're hoping Linus Ullmark starts in goal. Forsberg, the other option. Up front, we expect it to look like Tim Stützle with Brady Tkachuk and Claude Giroux. Ridley Gregg with David Perron and Drake Patterson. Shane Pinto hasn't been ruled out for this game. We'll see if he's able to play. If so, he'll probably center with Cole Reinhardt and Michael Amadio, and then Zach Ostapchuk with Matthew Highmore and Adam Gaudette. On the back end, Jake Sanderson with Artem Zub, Thomas Chabot with Nick Jensen, Tyler Clevin with Travis Hamonic, and I'd expect, based on ice time last game, Nicholas Matin-Palo to be the extra. Give me a locked-on player to watch.
I'm going to be locked on to number 72, Thomas Chabot. I mean, this guy's on a 3-game point streak. Ever since the win streak started against the Leafs, Ross, there's only 2 games where he doesn't have points. The 6-0 win, ironically, against the Minnesota Wild, and then the 3-1 win over Utah. Every other game he has points in these 3-game point streak. He's got 4 points. I mean, 2 assists up against Tampa the first game and then 1, and both of those losses. And Ross, he had 7 shots on goal last night up against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he's back with his right-hand man, literally right-hand shot man in Nick Jensen. So there's no reason why that pair can't get back to what they were doing. And sure, would you like to have Chabot play a little harder on that play that leads to Brandon Hagel getting that breakaway? Yeah. But again, I'm more tipping my cap to Brandon Hagel on that play more than I am putting full blame on Chabot and or Forsberg. But I think Chabot's in a good spot right now, and I'm going to be locked on to him up against the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I've been riding the Thomas Chabot over 2 shots on goal for plus money, and it's hit in 3 of the last 4 games for the Ottawa Senators, and 4 of the last 5, actually. He's got 20 shots in the last 5 games, 6 points. So I like that call there. I'm going with the captain, Brady Tkachuk. I mean, we're hoping that he's healthy and feeling good after that scary collision. He did come back and finish the game. No points in the 2 games in Tampa. It's almost like he cares too much. And I know that's almost hyperbole, and it's a catchphrase and all that. You care too much, you try too hard, but it felt like the effort was there for Brady Tkachuk. The shots on goal had 5 of them in each, but it feels like the execution was really tough for him in Tampa. So I'm hoping that he goes into the break. I think Sens fans would really appreciate their captain leading them to victory in a battle against his brother. They got the one in Ottawa earlier this year. We'll see if there's any Matthews better chance. Obviously, a little payback to Ottawa doing it in the home opener,
which we disavowed.
Way too early.
Yeah,
before the game, buddy. Come on. But Brady needs to pop off. Like, didn't Brady have this thing where when he scored once, he'd score twice in a game? I think it was last year where he scored.
No, I think that was this year.
Well, no, this year he's got 2 2-goal games.
Oh man,
last year I feel like he had a bunch of 2-goal games. Let's see. Last year he had 9 2-goal games.
Okay, wow.
The Sens were 8-1 when he scored 2 goals in a game last year. This year they're 1-0-1 when he's got 2 tucks. But like, I just feel like he needs not a legacy game, but he needs a game where he takes the bull by the horns and said, "Follow me, guys. I'm going to put the puck in the net." Like, he's doing a lot of other good things out there. He rocked Eric Chernak in the game. He's thrown guys into their own bench. He's been physical. He's been all that. He's been better defensively too. But when you're getting that much money and you're the leader of the team, you got to put the puck in the net. And Brady Tkachuk's had a history of doing that, and he hasn't done it a whole lot lately. So I'm going to be watching for Brady Tkachuk to score in this game at least once. And I mean, hopefully twice. You go all the way back to the Vancouver game, Pillsy, the game after you saw him score the overtime winner against Calgary. He's got 4 goals in 23 games.
Yeah.
Like, that's way below his average, way below his pace, and way below his expectations. So I'm going to be watching for Brady Tkachuk in this game on Saturday to take over and dominate this game.
Yeah, I mean, he has had 5 shots in both the Tampa games. I'm not going to dog his effort, but yeah, we got to see him be able to convert those chances. But unfortunately, Ross, the Florida Panthers is not where Brady Tkachuk shines. I believe I checked it. He only had like 7
I got
points.
it.
Oh, what is it?
5 goals, 7 points in 18 games, -9.
Yeah. So it's going to be a tall task for him to show up in this game. And who knows what the lines are going to be like, Ross. Yesterday's game, Ridley Gregg was the number 1 center. Batherson was on the 3rd line. Like, it was just all over the place. So we'll see what Travis Green comes up with up against Florida. I'm assuming they're not going to call anyone up, because if you were going to call someone up, you would have done it for the Tampa game. And I don't even know who they could and how they could do it with the way the cap is. So we'll see if they go 11-7 again. My God, I hope not. But yeah, Brady Tkachuk's the leader of this team. And like you mentioned, this is a game where if you can find a way to win this game and at least go into the break with that kind of feather in your cap, it would go a long way to go into the break with a win like that and to boost yourself in the standings a little bit more heading into the break. So it's a good call.
The Florida Panthers can't boost themselves in the Atlantic Division standings anymore. They are first place right now after a last-second win in yesterday's game. They're 1 point ahead of the Toronto Maple Leafs, although the Leafs have 2 games in hand on them there. The Panthers are 7-3-0 in their last 10 games. They're 16-9-2 on home ice, and they will line up like this with a fully healthy roster. Alexander Barkov is centering Carter Verhaeghe and Sam Reinhart. Sam Bennett is between Maki Samoskevich and Matthew Tkachuk. Anton Lundell with Eetu Luostarinen and Evan Rodriguez. And the fourth line is Thomas Nosek with AJ Greer and Jesper Bokvist. On the back end, it's Gustav Forsling with Aaron Ekblad, Nico Mikola with Dmitry Kulikov, and you've got Balinskis and Nate Schmidt on the bottom pair. Sergei Bobrovsky in goal with Spencer Knight. Pilsy, your lookout player to watch.
My lookout player to watch for this game, Ross. I'm not going to try to get too creative with this one. Just going to stick with the low-hanging fruit. It's going to be number 19, Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, this guy is an ultimate gamer. The big brother statement just rings so true between the Florida Panthers and the Ottawa Senators, and then with Matthew Tkachuk and Brady Tkachuk. We talked about how Brady doesn't necessarily have a lot of success up against the Florida Panthers. Well, that's not the case with Matthew Tkachuk and the Ottawa Senators, as he has 27 points in 27 games up against the Sens, and he's hot right now. I think Matthew Tkachuk, Florida Panthers fans were a little disappointed with how he started his season off, but he's figured it out now. Ross, in his last 5 games, he's on a point streak with 6 goals, 4 assists, 10 points in his last 5 games. He's getting 2 points per game in his last 5. So he's going to be just an absolute menace up against the Sens like he always is. And I love watching Matthew Tkachuk, but it sucks when he's the guy dunking on your team. Yeah,
it's always a matchup he gets up for. I'm almost curious, though, and this goes for Brady Tkachuk as well, and to a lesser extent, Linus Ullmark. I feel like he's got other things on his mind, but are they looking ahead to the Four Nations?
I mean, Florida maybe, because Ross,
right?
like you mentioned, they're first in the Atlantic Division, and they're not really too worried about, like, this game doesn't really affect what's going on with them big picture or in the standings. So that certainly could be the case.
Did Carter Verhaeghe make Team Canada?
Not sure.
He should have.
With the way Team Canada picks their squads. Probably not then.
Yeah, who knows? Well, they do guaranteed have Sam Reinhart there, and Alex Barkov, and Matthew Tkachuk. Did Sam Bennett make the team? Why do I think Sam Bennett made the team?
He could have.
I should learn my Team Canada roster for Four Nations is what we're learning.
I've been too locked onto the Senators to worry about the Four Nations. Like I hope Senators players have been as well.
Sam Bennett did. Verhaeghe did not. So there you go. So Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, Gustav Forsling, like they've got a lot of guys that are at this tournament, and Lundell too with Team Finland. So they've got a lot of. Did Luostarinen make it? Maybe. I mean, Team Finland, he should. Yeah, he definitely.
Yeah, he probably made it too. Yeah.
So that's a lot of guys who are already packing their bags for Boston and Montreal, and maybe thinking ahead. I mean, I'm looking at any advantage for the Ottawa Senators here because this is a great team. Didn't even mention in goal Sergei Bobrovsky, future Hall of Famer. Crazy to say, but he definitely is. 2-time Vezina winner, Stanley Cup champion, and Spencer Knight is the backup goalie there. But I'm going to stick on that Tkachuk line. I'm going to go with Sam Bennett, and I'm going to go with that direction because the way that the Florida Panthers have beaten the Ottawa Senators over the course of the last number of years is in the trenches. Sure, they're a better team, and they've been blowout wins for the most part, but it's because they grind the Senators down and they get them into the alleyway and make the Sens look for the fight rather than trying to play the game. And a big part of that is both of our lookout players in Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett. Those guys do it better than anyone in terms of agitating, but they can still play too.
Ross, perfect example of that. Matthew Tkachuk got Jake Sanderson to fight him. Like, this guy doesn't even take minor penalties, let alone a major and a fight up against Tkachuk. Like, that is like
it's like 20% of Sanderson's penalty minutes in his career are that fight.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, if you can get that guy that pissed off, you could do it to anyone.
Yeah. So I would actually like it to be a pond hockey style game against Florida. Like no animosity. I doubt it's going to happen, but like, did you feel that way about the Tampa games, by the way? Like there was no pushing and like it didn't feel like a playoff game from that standpoint.
No, there wasn't much of that. And I think just Ross, both of those teams felt like they were in delicate situations and didn't want to be on the wrong side of penalties. Like the only time that happened was when Chernak was deciding he was going to pick on a first grader as an eighth grader. And the Matthew Highmore made a business decision, was like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And Chernak got the 2-minute unsportsmanlike. But other than that, no, it was pretty tame between two rivals battling for playoff spots.
Yeah, so we'll see how this game goes. There's a chance it gets out of hand, but hopefully it's just a nice 4-2 win for the Ottawa Senators would be fantastic for my mental health going into the break. The Panthers are led by Sam Reinhart, who has 61 points in 56 games this year. They've also got Matthew Tkachuk and Alexander Barkov over a point per game. Barkov with 50 and 46 and Tkachuk with 54 in 51. They've got too much talent to be anywhere but first place in the division. And that's what it makes me nervous too. Like this isn't a gimme game for them from that sense either, because they're battling the Leafs right now to be the top team in the Atlantic. So we're looking forward to this one. Hockey Night in Canada. We'll have the postcast for you after the game. Pilsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Final thoughts for me, Ross, is and maybe this goes against what we were just saying, but I'm looking not at the Four Nations face-off, but past it. Whatever happens tonight, I'm not going to let it get me too high. Like if they get this win, I'm not going to have the pom-poms out and be 8 out of 10 excited and get too crazy. And if they get the loss, I'm not going to turn on the panic button and start thinking about that and smash my jersey case behind me. I'm not getting too high, too low, no matter what happens here. Let's hope flush this game out, regardless of the outcome, get healthier over the break, and then climb over that mountain that we've had so many road games, so many tough matchups, so many terrible schedule issues, so many injuries, and then it's home games, easier matchups, and you hope that that's when the Ottawa Senators can thrive. So for me, let's all just take a deep breath, exhale after the Four Nations break, and then get focused and get back on track. That's the way I'm viewing things here, Ross.
Love that. I think that's very well said, Pilsy. My final thoughts is that Jack let us down, not a math guy. The Islanders cannot kick the Sens out of a playoff spot by the Four Nations.
That's on brand for this podcast then, so he knows what he's doing.
The Senators will guaranteed be in a playoff spot by the time the Four Nations.
So let's all just chill. Like if you would have told Ross and I and Jack at the start of this year at the Four Nation break, the Ottawa Senators will be in a playoff spot, we would have taken that, especially if you added on the injuries, Ullmark not being able to play consistently, all these things. So we're in a decent spot right now, Sens fans. Let's not get too crazy.
Final thoughts from me, too. It is Levi Merilainen's return to the Belleville Senators tonight. They're in Rochester to take on the Americans. The last two meetings, Pilsy, 8-2 for Rochester and 7-4 for Rochester.
Yeah.
But guess what? Those were two games where Levi Merilainen did not play, nor did Matt Sogard. It was the call-ups, we'll call them, the ATO guys playing in those games. So big game for Belleville tonight. Stephen Halliday hoping to continue his point streaks. Belleville's 5-5-0 in their last 10 games. They won their last one, but this is a big game because they've really stumbled their way down the standings. They're 6th in the North Division. So hoping for a good little push here. Belleville's actually playing at the CTC next week as well. So be nice for them to get on a little bit of a run right now that they have a goalie back in the mix. Nice long show today on a Friday. Really appreciate everybody for liking, watching, listening, subscribing, and engaging with the show. It certainly means a lot to Pilsy and I. It's been an incredibly busy month and a half, but we wouldn't have it any other way. We are your team every day, and we appreciate everyone for venting and vibing with us after the games and every drive home here on LOSP. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.